status, now known as normal trade relations with Russia, joining with our allies in doing so. Very proud that in a very strong bipartisan way, we took action in the House this week to lift the purchase of Russian oil.
Breaking news, right now hundreds of thousands of Americans qualify for at least one more stimulus, but you need to take action in order to receive the check, because lawmakers have confirmed that it is not too late to claim this relief. And now in 2020 and in 2021, the federal government issued a total of 3 stimulus checks to struggling Americans. The money went to bank accounts in order to help the population cope with the financial consequences of the crisis, and help them cope with the consequences is what they did. 17 states also issued inflation relief checks. Payment amounts range from $50 to $1,000, just depending on the state and income level of the recipient. Most people received stimulus payments a long time ago, but not everyone did. Some people who did not file tax returns never got their money back. If you're one of them, the good news is that you may still have options to get the payments you're owed. But there's a catch. A big catch, that is. If you did not receive the full amount of the first 3 stimulus, you can still claim the funds. But the catch is that you must file a tax return now. So if you're missing all 3 payments, you need to file separate tax returns for the 2020 and 2021 tax year. It's because you can only claim the first 2 payments by filing a return, and you can only claim the third one by filing another return. But the good news is, if you do not owe any taxes for these years, you can file a late return without incurring a penalty for failure to file. You can submit your forms and get any refund you're owed, including stimulus money that went unpaid. So if you do not owe any taxes for these years, you can file a return without incurring a penalty for failure to file. You can submit your forms and get any refund you're owed, including stimulus money that went unpaid, with no adverse consequences. And if you filed a return but didn't claim the credits, you can submit an amended return. If you missed out on stimulus funds that you were owed, you may have received a letter from the IRS alerting you to the fact that you are entitled to the payment. If you got this letter and didn't act yet, you should do so now and get your tax return submitted as soon as possible. If you didn't receive your payments and are owed stimulus money, don't leave it on the table. Get your tax returns in as soon as possible for the relevant tax years to get the money the government owes you. There's no reason to pass up thousands of dollars in financial relief that could help put food on the table or pay for an emergency fund, when it's just a matter of some paperwork. The IRS issued guidance regarding the federal tax status involving special payments made by 21 states in 2022, determining that taxpayers in many states will not need to report these payments on their tax returns. Taxpayers who receive stimulus checks in the following states do not need to report these state payments on their tax return: California, Colorado, and Connecticut, and as well as Florida and Hawaii are all the states that are doing this. And in Georgia, Massachusetts, and South Carolina, residents who did not receive a tax benefit from a state tax refund, whether they claim to stand deduction or itemized deductions, the payment is not included as income. The California residents received more than $600 for the middle class tax refund, already receiving a 1099, which means if the state does not amend and reissue the forms, there will be a mismatch that could cause a delay in refunds.
The White House last month said that they opposed this Republican resolution to block the crime laws. 173 House Democrats voted against it. Now a lot of their members and Joe Biden support this resolution. How are you going to vote? And secondly, how did Democratic leaders in the White House so badly bungle this issue?
I'm going to vote yes. It was a close question, but on balance, I'm voting yes.
Well, how did you guys manage
Next. Go ahead.
Folks, there's a big update on the 4th stimulus check. Joe Biden has unveiled a new relief package that could charge and change the amount of the 4th stimulus payment. Some seniors could actually be receiving a larger check as well. Social Security is facing a financial shortfall. In the coming years, it expects to spend more on benefits than what it takes in. This is thanks to the large workforce of baby boomers exiting the workforce. However, Social Security has trust funds it can tap to make up its revenue shortfalls. But once those trust funds are depleted, benefit cuts will be on the table unless lawmakers manage to come up with a fix. And now there are several different solutions that have been introduced along those lines. And one is to raise full retirement age, which is known as FRA. This is when filers are entitled to their monthly benefits without a reduction. Currently, full retirement age is 67 for anyone born in 1960 or later, but lawmakers have suggested pushing it back to 68. According to the University of Maryland's program for public consultation, doing so could eliminate 14% of Social Security's projected shortfall. But while raising full retirement age may be a good way to prevent future benefit cuts, it can make a lot of people unhappy by forcing them to delay their retirement plans. And it's a reasonable idea that lawmakers are apt to consider. and namely because life expectancies have increased since FRA was established, and so asking people to delay retirement by a year doesn't read like such a ludicrous thing. In fact, Social Security recipients are allowed to claim benefits before FRA as early as age 62. And filing before FRA means accepting a reduced benefit, but that's a penalty some seniors are willing to face if it means getting their money sooner and getting to retire when they want. But if you don't have much in the way of retirement savings and expect to be heavily dependent on Social Security during your senior years, then you may not be able to afford a lower benefit. And so in that case, you might have to delay your retirement by a year if FRA is moved back. And while it remains unclear whether Americans could see a fourth round of stimulus from the Fed government, homeowners throughout the United States could be eligible for additional financial aid under the Homeowner Assistance Fund. The purpose of the Homeowner Assistance Fund is to prevent mortgage delinquencies and defaults, foreclosures, and loss of utilities. Homeowners can use the funds to help pay for mortgage payments, homeowners insurance, and utility payments and other purposes. While homeowner assistance funds are not the same as the 3 stimulus checks that were rolled out, they were allocated as part of the American Rescue Plan, and nearly $10 billion was set aside for the fund, so it's definitely going to help many people. Folks, President Biden has just announced that gas rebate cards for many Americans are available for the 4th stimulus check and Social Security benefits. Be sure to continue watching this video because you definitely don't want to miss out on it. Stimulus checks in 2020 and 2021 prevented the U.S. from entering a recession or maybe even a depression. Though due to the inflow of capital going to both people and businesses, inflation has risen and lawmakers are facing a dilemma. They have to determine if more direct relief will present somewhat of a chance to rising inflation, even more, or if it could help the U.S. curb inflation. Lawmakers are pushing for the latter as millions of more people continue to urge that Congress take more action. Stimulus checks and the $3 trillion in relief allegedly have contributed 3% in inflation by the end of 2021. The direct relief payment helped the bank accounts of millions of Americans, and if more relief is spent heavily on discretionary purchases that might make costs rise. According to the data from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, found that relief from the government prevented 11 million Americans from falling into poverty. The department reported that the most impactful programs for alleviating poverty was economic impact payments under the American Rescue Plan and unemployment compensation. Now, a tax policy center and a senior researcher found that a new round of checks would definitely help Americans dealing with inflation. She stated delivering some sort of cash benefit now would sort of protect them from the inflation that's happening around them. And a former presidential campaign candidate, Andrew Yang, said that stimulus checks are not to blame for inflation and that he's definitely pro-direct relief. Supporters of a 4th stimulus check have agreed that a quick, broad outpouring of cash would really ease the economic hardships caused by the crisis. And now, according to Fox, President Biden may resort to using emergency powers if oil companies don't increase output at their refineries. The letters come one day after Biden ordered the sale of another 45 million barrels of crude oil from the U.S. Strategic Oil Reserve. Biden's letters does not offer a timeline for when his administration will resort to emergency powers, threatening to only do so in the near term, and the oil companies have yet to publish a response to Biden's letter. The administration is touting airline standards it is proposing to adopt as a climate win, even though its technical documents say that the rule is not expected to cut.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome back to the committee. Chair Powell, it's good to see you again. I want to follow up on this